You know, enterprise technology usually feels a lot like looking at a medical x-ray.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right. It's binary. Like a server is up or it's down.
Yeah.
A specific user has permission to read a file or they don't. You can literally pull up a network topology diagram, point your finger at a firewall and say, there it is. That is exactly how the traffic flows.
Right, right. It's totally predictable. I mean, we basically built the entire IT industry on the comfort of that visibility.
Exactly.
Having those strict categories with clear mechanical cause and effect.
But then, you inject autonomous AI agents into that network and suddenly that x-ray machine is just broken.
Oh, completely.
We are navigating some really diagnostic muddy waters right now. So today we are pulling from a massive stack of notes. Andrew Kagan's weekly newsletter, which tracks random technical news you can possibly use.
A great resource.
It really is. And we are diving into his dispatches covering everything from, Azure infrastructure to Microsoft 365, DevOps, data analytics, security, and beyond. Because when you look at the whole picture for this deep dive, the underlying theme is a massive enterprise reality check.
Yeah, we are way past the hype of AI now.
Right. We are in the hard, messy reality of building and securing systems where the software literally acts on its own.
Exactly. And when you synthesize these updates, what becomes immediately apparent is how every single layer of the tech stack is fundamentally changing.
From the back-end routing, right?
Right, from the deepest back-end routing all the way to the dashboard the CEO looks at. It's all changing to support these agentic workflows. We're no longer just deploying software applications. We are deploying digital actors.
Wow. Digital actors. And to understand that shift, you have to look at the brains of those actors, right? And the data they consume.
Yeah, the fuel.
So, in Kagan's notes on data analytics and AI, we see Anthropic's Claude Fable 5, their new Mythos class model. It's becoming available in Microsoft Foundry. And the entire selling point here is that it's designed for long-horizon autonomous tasks.
Right.
But the piece that actually made me stop and reread it was the update to Microsoft Fabric.
Oh, the live refresh.
Well, the live refresh is now generally available, but specifically the SharePoint and OneDrive shortcuts in OneLake. Those are GA now, too. And crucially, they support service principal and workspace identity authentication.
Ah, yes. That authentication detail is, honestly, the linchpin of enterprise AI.
Okay, let's unpack this, because why does that matter so much to the listener?
Well, think about it. A service principal isn't a human user. It's an identity created specifically for an application or like an automated tool to access resources.
Okay.
So think about how things used to work.
Hmm.
A developer might set up a data pipeline using their own personal credentials.
Right, which happens all the time.
Exactly. And if that developer leaves the company, their account gets deactivated, and suddenly the pipeline just breaks. The AI goes blind.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So by using a service principal or a workspace identity, you completely decouple the data pipeline from human turnover. It allows those critical M365 documents in SharePoint to connect directly to Fabric for AI grounding. And it does it at a massive scale, securely and permanently.
Okay, but I have to push back here for a second. Giving an AI long horizon autonomy over live updating company data, that sounds like a compliance nightmare.
It does, yeah.
Like if a team updates a highly confidential merger document in SharePoint, the AI knows about it instantly. Is it really safe to give a model like Fable 5 that kind of unrestrained access?
Well, it's a very valid concern. And it's exactly why you don't just drop an advanced agent into your environment and hope for the best.
Right.
That's why Microsoft requires Fable 5 to be run inside Microsoft Foundry. Foundry basically wraps the underlying model in your existing enterprise governance and strict Entra ID authentication.
So it's like inheriting the permissions?
Precisely. The AI doesn't get blanket access to the OneLake repository. It only sees the data that this specific human user interacting with it is permitted to see.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the permissions from SharePoint are incrementally synced to keep the AI's knowledge index from drifting away from your real-time access policies. So if you don't have access to the merger document...
The AI acts as if the document doesn't exist.
Exactly. When you prompt it, it just doesn't know it's there.
Okay, that makes sense. But an AI with a secure brain still needs hands to do the work, right? It needs infrastructure to execute its ideas.
Yes, the Azure layer.
Right. Looking at the Azure updates, we are seeing the underlying architecture really warp to accommodate this. Azure Logic Apps automation is now in public preview, and it's a SaaS experience meant to make automation a team sport, with projects acting as security boundaries and applications acting as workflows.
Right.
But the standout feature here is Knowledge as a Service, or ABAS, being built directly into Logic Apps.
This is a profound shift for developers.
Okay.
Like building a retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, pipeline manually is incredibly tedious.
Oh, I bet.
You have to figure out how to chunk your documents, run them through an embedding model to turn the text into mathematical vectors, store those vectors in a specialized database, and then orchestrate similarity searches every time a user asks a question.
Right, so before KBAS, developers were essentially driving a manual transmission.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
They had to constantly shift gears between the chunking logic, the vector database, and the LLM API. But Knowledge as a Service acts like an automatic transmission.
Exactly.
The developer just builds the Logic App workflow, hits the gas, and Azure handles all the complex gear shifting of the RAG pipeline underneath. It just completely democratizes AI automation.
And what's fascinating is how this architecture blends accessibility with rigorous enterprise controls.
Right.
It's not just some chat box bolted onto a database.
Right.
Logic Apps automation actually allows developers to invoke Foundry-hosted agents directly within isolated sandboxes. You get this nice low-code drag-and-drop UI on the front end, but underneath, it is running on hardcore enterprise networking.
And speaking of networking, Kagan's notes highlight a massive shift in cloud landing zones toward a DMZ-first architecture, and this is based on traffic flow.
Exactly. We are seeing a real move away from trusting everything inside the corporate network.
Because of the agents.
Right. If AI agents are autonomously navigating your infrastructure, your security architecture must be driven by traffic trust boundaries and inspection intent. You're enforcing security before access is ever granted.
So you basically have to assume the internal network is inherently hostile.
You do. It aligns closer to the OSI model where inspection happens at the application layer, not just the network layer.
Which brings up a really interesting dilemma for the people actually building this stuff. In the DevOps and site reliability engineering updates, there's this fascinating note about Microsoft's own internal operations.
Oh, the GitHub migration.
Yes. They are migrating 4,000 active repositories to GitHub to access new agentic capabilities. But they were using a hybrid model, right? Keeping Azure boards and Azure pipelines for their CI/CD while moving the actual source code to GitHub.
Yeah.
Wait, pause. If I'm an IT director listening to this, and Microsoft owns both platforms, why this massive, highly visible push to GitHub? Doesn't that signal that Azure Repos is effectively a dead product?
It's super easy to jump to that conclusion,
Yeah.
but if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's not about killing Azure Repos. It's about optimizing the environment for the AI.
Okay, how so?
GitHub is fundamentally where the AI tools live natively. That's where Copilot Coding Agent, Copilot Chat, and these agentic pull request reviews are deeply architecturally integrated.
So they want the AI native environment for the code.
Right, but enterprise project management is incredibly complex. Large organizations still rely on the deep, robust controls of Azure boards for planning and compliance.
Right, you can't just abandon that.
No, exactly. So by using a hybrid model and connecting the two platforms using AB hashtag syntax, where tagging a pull request in GitHub automatically updates the work item in Azure DevOps, Microsoft gets the bleeding-edge AI generation of GitHub without sacrificing their mature enterprise governance.
That is a really critical distinction. And since we're talking about GitHub Copilot, there's a massive caveat in the notes that anyone managing compliance needs to hear.
Oh, the Fable 5 retention policy.
Yes. Claude Fable 5 is now generally available in GitHub Copilot. But unlike most models in Copilot, which operate under a zero data retention policy, Fable 5 requires a 30-day data retention policy.
Listeners managing risk or compliance absolutely cannot ignore this, because Fable 5 is designed for long-horizon autonomy, meaning it can chain complex actions together over hours or days without human intervention. Anthropic absolutely requires prompts and outputs to be held for 30 days.
Wait, why? Why do they need it sitting on a server for a month?
To run their safety classifier.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they need to detect harmful use, prompt injection, or malicious autonomous behavior. Now, Microsoft and Anthropic are very clear that this data is not used to train their foundational models. But your compliance and legal teams still need to know that proprietary code snippets or prompts are sitting in a retention environment for a month.
Wow.
In fact, if your organizational policy explicitly blocks data retention, Fable 5 simply remains unavailable in your tenant.
That makes sense. And, the tools available to these developers are just getting wilder. Apple Silicon Macs are now available in Azure pipelines with pay-per-minute billing, which is fantastic for iOS
It's
developers.
huge for them, yeah.
But the real game changer is Copilot code reviews hitting Azure repos. It's not just auto-completing a line of Python anymore. The AI is actively participating in the peer review process, automatically suggesting structural fixes, and even generating its own pull requests.
Which is an incredible productivity boost, but I mean, it completely shatters the traditional security perimeter.
Exactly. And this is where we really have to pivot to security, compliance, and privacy. Because here is the glaring issue with having AI actively write and review code. If an agent can autonomously write a script and autonomously approve it, it can autonomously execute a mistake or a malicious payload across your entire network.
Yep, the blast radius.
Right. How do you contain the blast radius of a non-human employee?
Well, this is where we see the concept of identity fundamentally evolving. Look at the new Agent 365 rollout. It allows IT administrators to manage identity and access controls within Microsoft Entra, specifically for AI agents.
Wait, are you seriously telling me AI agents are getting their own Entra ID identities, like a new hire?
Yes. They aren't just generic scripts running under a legacy service account anymore.
That's crazy.
They are being treated as individual non-human identities. And because they have an Entra ID, they are suddenly subject to conditional access policies.
Okay, give me an example of how that works in practice.
So let's say an AI agent is tasked with pulling financial data from an AWS Bedrock database. If that agent suddenly tries to initiate the connection from an unrecognized suspicious IP address or tries to access the data at 3:00 a.m. on a Sunday.
Entra flags it.
Exactly. Entra can evaluate that context and block the agent's access, just like it would for a human employee.
And that works across different cloud providers.
Absolutely. Microsoft Defender is heavily expanding its cross-cloud capabilities right now. It now provides protection directly for AWS RDS instances. It's also expanding to monitor RPC remote procedure call activity.
Okay, what does that do?
Well, RPC is often used by attackers or compromised agents to execute lateral movement across a network. So Defender is now actively watching for those specific anomalous execution patterns.
Wow. And to stop sensitive data from leaking out through the agents themselves, Microsoft Purview is stepping in with runtime data loss prevention, or DLP, for agent prompts in Foundry. It basically blocks sensitive data before exfiltration. But how does that actually work? Because the AI isn't just looking for a simple 16-digit credit card number anymore.
Right, that's the key. Under the hood, Purview isn't just relying on simple regex patterns. It is using semantic classifiers at runtime.
Okay.
As the agent builds its prompt or its output in Foundry, Purview analyzes the intent of the payload. If the agent autonomously decides to summarize an unreleased Q3 earnings document and attempts to send that summary to an external API, the Purview classifier recognizes the semantic risk and literally severs the connection before the packet even leaves the sandbox.
That is incredible. Oh, and before we leave security, Kagan's newsletter touches on new Windows features rolling out for post-quantum cryptography. And this is meant to prevent harvest now, decrypt later attacks.
Yes, HNDL.
Right, HNDL. For the listener who isn't steeped in cryptography, what is an HNDL attack?
HNDL is a terrifying concept, honestly. Adversaries know they cannot break modern encryption like RSA 2048 with today's computers. So they don't even try.
They just wait.
They simply steal the encrypted data today and hoard it. They are waiting for the day when quantum computers become powerful enough to run algorithms like Shor's algorithm, which can instantly factor the massive prime numbers that secure our data.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So post-quantum cryptography involves entirely new mathematical frameworks that even quantum computers struggle to solve. And Microsoft is building that defense at the platform level into Windows right now.
Okay, so we've governed the agents, we've quantum-proofed the cryptography, but let's be real. The weakest link isn't the math, it's the human sitting at the keyboard.
It always is.
Always. Which brings us to the Microsoft 365 updates and securing the human element. Because if a human gets phished, the attacker inherits all of their AI access.
Precisely. And this is why Microsoft is rolling out Entra passkey registration campaigns. IT can now automatically nudge users to set up device-bound or synced passkeys.
You know, passkeys are one of those things everyone knows they should use, but setting them up always feels like a chore. Why are organizations being so aggressive about pushing them right now?
Because passwords, even complex ones, are structurally flawed. A passkey eliminates the concept of a shared secret entirely. It relies on public key cryptography.
Okay.
Your device, your phone or laptop, generates a private key that is stored securely on a hardware chip. and a public key that is sent to the server.
Hmm.
When you log in, the server sends a mathematical challenge that can only be solved by your device's private key.
So even if a user is tricked into going to a fake phishing version of their login page, what happens?
The attack just fails.
Really?
Yeah. The passkey protocol requires cryptographic proof of the domain you are connecting to. If the domain is fake, the device simply refuses to solve the challenge. The user literally cannot give their credentials away. This is a core part of organizations trying to meet the essential 8 cybersecurity requirements for MFA everywhere by closing that legacy authentication gap.
It's basically the tech equivalent of a dentist reminding you to floss, but you actually can't leave the office until you do.
Exactly. But a quick operational warning for the admins listening.
Oh, what's that?
If your user base has specific constraints, like a policy stating they are only allowed to use device-bound passkeys and are blocked from using sync passkeys, don't use the generic enable for everyone campaign yet.
Why not?
The automated campaign doesn't fully parse those granular profiles yet. If you turn it on blindly, you might end up prompting users to set up a sync passkey only for the system to block them at the final step, creating massive help desk friction.
Yikes. Yeah, that's a great operational tip. You cannot automate governance without understanding the underlying policy constraints.
Right.
So assuming the human layer is locked down and passwordless, organizations can finally start handing the power of AI directly to the business users. This shows up heavily in the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 updates. The June updates for Power BI are staggering. We're looking at AI-powered Power BI reporting.
It's wild. It allows a business user to design, build, validate, and publish reports entirely through natural language using agent skills.
So what does this all mean for the analyst who has spent, 5 years mastering SQL or DAX queries?
It means their job is evolving. Business users don't necessarily need to know the database query language anymore. They just need to know how to articulate the business problem to the agent. Furthermore, Fabric Apps for semantic models is letting teams build custom web apps with Fabric acting entirely as the backend. It completely democratizes data access.
But there's a massive trapdoor here, right? Shane Young had some brilliant insights on the Power Platform recently, and he pointed out that organizations absolutely must be in a state of full governance before turning this on. If I just let an AI loose on natural language queries, what's the worst that could happen?
Oh, well, if your underlying data governance is a mess, like if your SharePoint permissions aren't strictly enforced, or your semantic models aren't properly labeled, giving business users natural language AI tools is just going to confidently generate messes at an unprecedented scale.
Right, because the AI doesn't know what's sensitive, it just knows what's connected.
Exactly. If the semantic model isn't logged down, an innocent query from a sales rep like, show me team performance metrics, might prompt the AI to traverse poorly secured HR folders.
Oh, no.
Yeah, surfacing sensitive salary data or performance reviews right there in the Power BI dashboard. Natural language removes the friction of discovery, which means it also removes the friction of accidental data breaches.
A fast mess is still a mess.
Oh.
And learning how to prevent those messes leads us into the massive skill shift happening right now. The learning and certifications updates show that the baseline of technical knowledge is moving rapidly for everyone.
It really is. It doesn't matter if you are a business user or a veteran sysadmin.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
How comfortable are you with explaining how a vector database works right now? Because according to these updates, that is the new baseline.
And you have to understand the mechanics. You need to know that a vector database doesn't just search for keywords. It uses embedding models to map words and concepts into a high-dimensional mathematical space. So the database understands that the word dog and the word puppy are mathematically close to each other, even if they share no letters. That similarity search is the absolute foundation of modern RGAG applications.
And developers have to learn how to manage distributed multi-agent systems using Aspire 13.4 and the Microsoft Agent Framework. Even Security Operations Center analysts are having to adapt. The skills required to pass a SOC analyst interview are entirely different today.
Because you are no longer just looking at logs of human behavior or static malware signatures. You have to understand how an AI behaves, how it hallucinates, and what agentic lateral movement actually looks like in a network log.
It is a whole new world. So zooming out from the training manuals and the daily deployment grind, what is the rest of the industry talking about at the bleeding edge? Looking at the industry news and trends section, John Savile's recap of the Build conference really captured the current mood. He used the theme of hill climbing.
It's a very apt metaphor. The industry is realizing that the hype phase is over. It is less about chasing flashy, out-there features right now, and more about the rigorous, unglamorous work of continuously improving compute efficiency, optimizing data pipelines, refining evaluations to reach reliable outcomes.
Just doing the work.
Yeah, the steady work of making AI actually trustworthy for the enterprise.
But if you want to look over the horizon at the wild stuff, the notes from the AIE Europe 2026 conference are mind-bending. There was a talk titled "RAG is Dead." Another was about reverse engineering a Viking VoIP phone protocol using Claude code. But the one that absolutely stopped me in my tracks was a presentation simply titled "Agents Don't Do Stand-Ups."
That is such profound observation about the future mechanics of work.
Here's where it gets really interesting. For 20 years, agile software development has been built around the daily stand-up. Humans getting together for 15 minutes to coordinate their blockers and their progress. But if your team is half human and half autonomous agents, an AI agent doesn't need to wait for a 9 a.m. Zoom call to unblock a project.
No, they don't.
They communicate asynchronously, instantly, 247. It is completely fracturing our traditional ideas of team communication and project management.
And that inter-agent communication is already being formalized.
Yeah.
We are seeing the rise of A2A, or agent-to-agent protocols.
Wait, what does that look like?
Projects like WorkIQ are enabling context-aware experiences where agents can seamlessly collaborate across entirely different platforms.
Wow.
Imagine an HR onboarding agent negotiating software licenses directly with an IT provisioning agent. They authenticate, exchange context, execute the provisioning, and log the action, honoring all tenant boundaries and sensitivity labels without a human ever having to intervene or send an email.
It's incredible. Well, we've covered an immense amount of ground today. We've gone from the long horizon autonomy of Claude Fable 5 and the democratized RI pipelines of Azure Logic Apps, all the way to agentic identities in Entra, quantum-proof cryptography, and the impending death of the daily agile stand-up. A massive thank you to you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive through Andrew Kagan's incredibly dense enterprise dispatch.
And if there's one final thing I want you to mull over as you close out this deep dive, it's this. As AI agents get their own Entra ID identities, as they are granted their own operational budgets to consume compute power, and as they gain the ability to negotiate with other agents across the globe via A2A protocols, at what point do we stop thinking of them as software applications and start treating them as digital employees?
That's a huge question.
And when that fundamental shift happens, how does your company's org chart change? Because suddenly a mid-level manager might not be managing humans at all. They might just be an orchestration layer for a fleet of digital actors.
That is a wild thought to leave on. Remember that medical X-ray analogy from the beginning. The clean, clear lines of traditional tech are gone. We are navigating the highly capable, heavily governed, muddy waters of the autonomous enterprise. But hopefully today's deep dive gave you a slightly better map to navigate it. Keep learning, keep questioning, and be sure to check back for our next deep dive. See you next time.